Hi, it's Heidi with Broadmeadow Farm, and today we'll be talking a little bit about how to divide perennials, as well as give you a little bit of a recap of the work that we've been doing here at my mom and dad's farm over the last week. So before we get into too much transplanting today, I'd like to share with you a little bit of the work that I've been doing with my mom in her garden. One thing we've kind of decided is, well, her garden was really pretty and beautiful. It was starting to feel too closed in and a little bit too chaotic. So what we've been doing over the weekend is opening up the space, giving each of her perennials a little bit more airflow so that we can have kind of a focus of each of the perennials, giving them the space that they need. The work we've been doing this week and weekend has been to help my mom kind of focus her efforts in her garden into one zone, reducing the inventory so it's a little bit easier for her to keep up because she has lots of other areas that she likes to focus her time on, not just working here in the garden. So we've started over here on this side. We actually took out a whole pile of perennials in this area. It was just too congested. We've allowed now for a pathway to come to this bench arbor that we pulled out of a different area in their yard. We're really working on reducing the inventory for her. It was just getting to be where this was the only area that she really wanted to work in, but it was too much and too tight and the weeds were getting in too much. The other issue that we are working on right now is amending her soil. We've got some pile of manure here that we're going to be bringing in, and then we'll be broad forking that in. Broad forking is just kind of a term where you take your spade fork in and you dig it into the ground and you lift the soil. So this area here is where she likes to put her annuals, here at the front. So once they are out for this fall, we'll be bringing in some more manure here, loosening the soil as well. They've got quite a high clay content, and what happens is that the soil turns almost to concrete and you can hardly get a fork or a spade in. So we'll work at getting that reduced and getting it loosened and fluffy. So we'll be working with bringing in the manure for that. We're also considering bringing in some mushroom compost that we can top up as well. In this area here, you can see kind of some of the before where it's a bit congested. We actually reduced this lady's mantle by over 3/4. It was just too big. So by next spring, it'll be a nicer, more manageable size. Each of these fence posts represent some peonies that we're bringing in from a different area in the farm. Part of the reducing of the inventory is bringing all of her perennials to this area so that she can work on one zone of her farm. Another way that we're going to work at getting that soil a little bit better is once it's all amended, we'll bring in this fall or maybe next spring a big load of bark mulch so that we can cover all of the topsoil. In previous videos, I've talked a lot about helping suppress your weeds by covering your soil. So by bringing in that bark mulch, we will allow the soil to be covered. The weed seeds will be kind of kept down in the dark and hopefully not germinate, but if they do germinate, they'll be easier to pull out because the compost and then the mulch will be keeping that moisture locked in on the soil, and then the soil won't be baked so tight for pulling the weeds. So this is an iris clump. So the important thing to know about an iris when you're planting it is not to bury this too deep. So let's put this iris clump here in the ground. We want to make sure that it's not too deep. This is about here where you want your soil level. Getting the soil in around each of those little roots. We've got some manure here that we're going to put in as well. You don't want them to be too deep. You want to have your soil about here. Anything deeper, if you go this deep, you're just going to bury it too deep and it's not going to produce anything, and you're going to have rot as well. So we'll put this to here, and that is how you would transplant an iris. So here we have a delphinium that I'm getting ready to transplant. You can see I'm digging the shovel in under the roots, trying to loosen up all of those roots so that when I go to pick it up, I don't rip everything out. So let's look here at this delphinium clump. You can see there is a root here, and one here. So when it comes to dividing, you can take your shovel and just slice it off, and you can get two pieces like that. So if you look really close, these are the little eyes for next year. These are more supporting roots, little tiny roots here. So that's why you can just slice it apart. Now if we look at this one, this little chunk has broke off, so that will make another plant. If you want to divide this into more, we can take the shovel and we can divide right here. Since we're moving into fall, one thing I recommend before we do any of these transplanting is we're going to cut all of this material off. This is my Felco number 2 pruner. I would highly recommend this pruner. But the reason that I like to cut this plant material off is now you've got a much more manageable plant for planting and in the garden. If we were in the middle of summer and you were planting your plant from a garden center, absolutely keep all of that green material on because it's going to be sending energy to your roots. But as we're nearing fall, and in fact we've actually had a light frost already, none of this plant material here is giving the plant any energy. In fact, it's just going to be shutting down. So in the late fall, I recommend that you chop down your plants about 6, maybe 8 inches so that you can see where they are in the garden. And let's go plant this. So I've dug my hole now. You can see this is the delphinium that I had previously dug up. It's in the hole now. We want to plant the soil with the level to about here, making sure your hole is nicely sized. And what we'll do is we'll put some of this topsoil around here, all around it. Seeing here that we bring the level up to about there. Using your fingers again to push it in. And we've got some manure here that I'll use the shovel to bring in just as a top dress to help fertilize. So here's something else that can happen in your garden. This here is a monk's hood, but what's growing up underneath in it is snowdrop anemone. So you have a couple options here. One, you can keep trying to pull this out, but what happens when you pull it out is you're only getting the leaves, not getting the roots. So you have the option of digging the entire plant up and then separating it out, the anemone from it, or you can dig up the plant and toss it. So one thing you need to think about is what is going on in your garden. Do you want the plant? Do you want to put the effort into it? Don't be afraid of being willing to get rid of plants if they are not serving your purpose. So here I have this clump of monkshood and snowdrop anemone. So what I can do is I can get my fingers in there and I can start pulling out all of the little plants that I don't want. Here I've got some of the snowdrop. We'll loosen up this clump until I'm able to get all of those little snowdrops out. We'll get in really close. Now if it's not working, maybe you've got quackgrass or anything in there, what you can do is start breaking up the actual clump. So here now I have this really nice clump of monkshood. Yes, it's small, but what we've done now is we've been able to clean out all of the anemone, which is what you want to do. You want to make sure that you have a perfectly clean plant for growing. We can look at this other clump. There's also some roots. Look at this one. This is one really nice monkshood. This is the eye for next year. Here we have the roots. And again, when I go to plant this, I'm going to trim this off right here. You don't have to plant this one all by itself. You can put all these little clumps together in the garden. Again, making sure your hole is a little bit bigger and don't bury it any deeper than about here. The nice clue is when you dig up a plant, wherever that soil level is, that's where you want to keep it in the future. Next up on our perennial list of things to divide is lilies. Here you can see I'm digging underneath the lilies, making sure that I'm keeping that shovel a little bit farther away so that I don't hook into any of those bulbs. So here in the soil you can see all of the little bulbs. Here's one here, don't miss that one. Again, look at all of these tiny little bulbs here. Each one of these little bulbs will turn into a larger lily that in a couple years will be producing blooms for you. You can see how they grow along the stem. So when it comes time to transplanting them, the main bulb, which is here, you want to be about 2 to 4 inches below the ground. So where I dug this, my fingers is where the soil level was. So now that I'm going to move these, make sure that this bulb right here is in the soil. Now when it comes to planting the lilies, I like to dig a shallow trench, lay the lilies in that I've dug up, and then just push the soil on both sides. So I had a question the other day in the comments of one of my videos asking if now is a really good time to be planting. And yes, especially if you want to be putting in any trees and shrubs. Your perennials are excellent as well. The beauty of putting in anything new right now into your garden is our temperatures are much lower during the day. Our evenings are cool. Everything is going into dormancy. So when you plant anything in the garden now, your trees, your shrubs, your perennials, give them a really good drink of water, help them get their roots situated into the ground. So I would say from now, which is September 1st, all the way to the end of the month is an excellent time to be planting your trees, shrubs, and perennials. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, click that like button down below. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and that little bell notification as well. It helps you get notified when I create new videos. It also helps my videos show up in YouTube and helps other people find me. Thanks for coming along with us today. It's great to share with you a little bit of what I'm doing for my mom in her garden as well. Hopefully you've got some tips now if you are looking to divide some of your perennials. And stay tuned next week. We'll dive right back into our Designing the Garden series. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.